For many people, philosophy can seem distant or mysterious, something hidden away in universities or associated with abstract speculation. It's often mistaken for a branch of religion or dismissed as an impractical luxury, interesting perhaps, but detached from everyday life. Others assume it's simply a subject with no right answers, just opinion, and therefore not worth taking seriously. This series of videos aims to show that philosophy is none of those things. It is a living, practical discipline that shapes how we think, create and act. The purpose of these videos is to introduce you to some of the great thinkers of the Western philosophical tradition, from the ancient Greeks to the modern era, and to explore what they thought about knowledge, morality, truth, and what it means to be human. These philosophers were not detached dreamers, but people trying to understand the world and our place within it. Philosophy invites us to pause and think deeply, to ask the so-called simple questions that often turn out to be the most profound. It's not about memorizing opinions, but about learning to examine them, to see how ideas connect and how they have shaped the way we live and think today. In that sense, philosophy is something we all already practice. Every time we ask what is true, what is just, or what makes life worth living. So philosophy is a practice just like mathematics, history or science. We are all to some degree philosophers, just as we are all to some degree mathematicians. You might use mathematics to decide whether you can afford something, or to estimate how much petrol a journey will require. That does not make you a professional mathematician working on complex theories, but it does mean you are already using mathematical thinking. In the same everyday way, you already use philosophy when you weigh a moral dilemma, when you judge whether a song or painting is authentic or nostalgic, when you ask whether a prison sentence is just, or when you criticise another culture. Philosophy is the reflective practice at work inside those ordinary judgments. While science builds theories and tests hypotheses, philosophy steps back and asks, what does it even mean to build a theory? What makes sense and what does not? Before we can do science, a background of meaning has to be in place. Words like theory, evidence and explanation do not explain themselves. Philosophy examines the concepts that make scientific work possible in the first place. Consider the concept of consciousness. We say with confidence that other human beings are conscious. But what about a mouse, an insect, or an artificial system that can perform far more tasks than a mouse, yet feels nothing? Is consciousness a matter of quantity? The sheer amount a being can do? That seems implausible. My cat is conscious, but she can do far less than a sophisticated AI language system. Or is consciousness a matter of quality? The felt experience of being alive? That is equally hard to pin down. I know my own experience, but I cannot know directly whether you or anyone else experiences the world as I do, or indeed experiences it at all. Science can scan the brain and show electrical and metabolic activity, but that does not prove the existence of consciousness. It reveals processes, not the presence of an inner life. Before science can investigate consciousness, philosophy must clarify what the concept means, what would count as evidence for it, and how we could justifiably attribute it to another being at all. This points to a deeper distinction. Scientific questions are empirical, that is, they're questions based on observation in the first instance. If I claim there is gold in Wales, we can test it, survey, dig, analyse and confirm or disconfirm. But a claim about consciousness is not so straightforward. We know exactly what gold is, down to its atomic structure. What precisely is consciousness? And how could we ever be sure another being has it? When we ask whether there is gold in Wales, the question can be answered with certainty because we know how to investigate it. We know what gold is, and we have reliable methods that lead to secure knowledge that gold is present or not. Here, know-how underpins knowledge that. I know how to investigate, and this leads me to know that gold is present or not. But with consciousness, the situation is different. We do not yet know how to establish its presence because it is unclear what exactly we are trying to detect. Without a clear method, the link between knowing how and knowing that breaks down. This is why we cannot say with certainty that consciousness exists in any particular being beyond ourselves. And yet, to say other people are conscious seems to be a matter of common sense. So what has gone wrong in our reasoning? Philosophy also brings into focus the limitations of our perspective. Human beings inhabit the world through the filter of human perception. Other animals inhabit it differently. Some birds of prey, for example, see ultraviolet patterns that are invisible to us. Dogs hear frequencies far beyond the human range. Bats navigate by echolocation, building a richly detailed spatial world from reflected sound. Each creature's way of perceiving shapes what the world is like for that creature, and therefore shapes what seems important, what is neglected, and what is even noticeable. Our sciences and technologies, however astonishing, arise from a human standpoint. Instruments extend our senses, but they do so from a human base. What we design, choose to measure, and take to be meaningful is constrained by our perceptual and conceptual apparatus. In that sense, even our most sophisticated theories carry the imprint of our form of life. There is a perennial temptation to demystify the world by appeal to a total explanation. In antiquity, that often took the form of gods of various kinds. In modernity, it is tempting to treat science as a single, all-justifying authority. Philosophy asks us to resist forms of worship, ancient or modern, that exceed their own grounds. To treat science as if it can answer every question is to demand of it more than science itself is able to deliver. Science excels at how questions. Philosophy presses the why questions that frame and direct our inquiries. If someone claims that philosophy is redundant and that science can do all the work, that claim itself is philosophical. The value, scope and limits of science are not scientific questions, they are philosophical ones. Likewise, many of our legal and political judgments rest on philosophical positions, even when those foundations remain unspecified. Science cannot tell us whether abortion or euthanasia are right or wrong. Its job is to inform us of the medical facts that can be used in forming moral judgments. One tempting but unsatisfactory route with consciousness is to stipulate a definition, to decide that conscious will mean this behavioural checklist or that neural pattern, and then measure it. But defining a solution into existence does not solve the mystery, it only shifts it. Philosophy is about how to think, not what to think. The very word philosophy comes from the Greek philos, meaning love, and sophia, meaning wisdom, the love of wisdom. That is a discipline of clarity, not a catalogue of dogmas, as some might suggest. Philosophy also ranges widely. It asks questions of identity. What makes you the same person you were 10 years ago? Is it memory, character, the continuity of a body, a narrative you tell yourself, or something else? It asks questions about God. Can there be a rational argument for the existence of God? If so, what makes such arguments rational? If not, what does it mean to believe? These are not arcane puzzles set apart from life. They are the questions that guide how we live. Such questions, and many others, reach into everyday life. For this reason, there are almost no stupid questions in philosophy. A question that sounds naive often has interesting roots. Ask it anyway. Ludwig Wittgenstein, the famous Austrian 20th century philosopher, once suggested that philosophers should greet one another by saying, "Take your time." The point is not to look impressive on your feet, but to think things through. Sometimes that means saying, "I need more time to consider what you have said." I was often considered slow at school for taking my time. The Greek philosopher Socrates, who never wrote a word but taught Plato, embodied this patience. He distrusted the sophists, the spin doctors of his day, who used rhetorical technique to persuade regardless of truth. He insisted on reasoned inquiry rather than verbal victory. If you want a modern example of sophistry, look no further than most of our contemporary political class. Philosophy is the antidote to that. It seeks understanding rather than mere persuasion. So where will this series of videos take us? In what follows, I will guide you through a history of Western philosophy and the development of Western thought, from the pre-Socratic philosophers of ancient Greece, through Plato and Aristotle, medieval thinkers such as Augustine and Anselm, the rise of modern science and rationalism, to the 19th and 20th century movements, and into contemporary debates. I will look at questions relating to knowledge, reality, the mind, language, identity, religion, and ethics, alongside how they still shape the way we live and reason today. I will not assume any prior knowledge. Philosophy helps us see the assumptions beneath our theories, refine the concepts we rely on, and make sense of questions that no experiment alone can settle. It reminds us that our understanding is always shaped by what and how we can perceive, and that intellectual honesty begins by recognizing limitations of those perceptions. Philosophy is just as much about well-formed questions as it is about answers. What does it mean to be conscious? What would count as finding it elsewhere? What makes a person the same over time? Can faith be rational? And what would that mean? How should we live, and what makes a life go well? Why is there something rather than nothing? To some extent, my choices of which philosophers to include have been selective, perhaps even a little arbitrary. Over time, I'll continue to add to these videos, expanding the range of thinkers and ideas. I have tried to strike a balance between making each video work as a self-contained explanation of a particular philosopher's ideas and placing those ideas in context, showing how they grow out of the thinkers and movements that came before them. I hope this selection offers a fair and balanced picture of how Western thought has developed, and above all, that it encourages you to think, question and enjoy the process of learning about philosophy.